Steve Clayton was found unresponsive on the bottom of his staircase. His cause of death was from something that is so common and readily available to almost everybody of every age group that I honestly didn't think that this could be used to kill someone. Hi, my name's Yasmin and I make videos about anything that's a little bit scary or disturbing, and if that's something that you would like to watch, then please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Here's the rest of the story. Lana and Steve met online in 2010 and instantly they hit it off. They had a really loving relationship and got married soon after. Lana was on to her second marriage and Steve was on to his sixth marriage. Steve was a very wealthy business owner who had a physical therapy company who helped people with sports-related injuries. And Lana still worked at the Veteran Affairs Hospital as a nurse, and she was quite experienced. Something that they both loved doing was hosting events at their beautiful South Carolina estate, which overlooked the Wiley Lake. They'd invite their friends and family over for dinner, drinks, and barbecues, and overall they were just surrounded by people and had a really colourful life. Everyone thought that they were a perfectly happy couple, and they really did seem to have it all. Steve's sister Rosie even mentioned that she was so happy that Steve had met Lana because Lana was a nurse and it meant that she could possibly take care of Steve if he needed it in the future. On the 21st of July 2018, Lana woke up and she turned around and she saw her husband peacefully sleeping beside her. She was quite relieved when she saw this because Steve had been really unwell for the past 3 days and had been suffering quite badly from vertigo. Because of this, Lana just got out of bed really slowly, didn't switch the lights on, and just got everything ready for her husband on his bedside table. All his medications, all his water, any snacks, anything he needed so that he didn't have to come downstairs for it. Once she did that, she just snuck out of the room and went down the staircase into the kitchen to complete her morning routine. At around 11 a.m, Lana got a little bit worried because Steve hadn't come back downstairs yet. She hadn't heard from him at all. She didn't hear any movements or anything upstairs. So she went and checked on him and he was still fast asleep. So she decided to just go outside and do some gardening. She started mowing the lawns and just potted around a little bit. But some time went by and Lana still hadn't heard from him, so she walked back to the house and opened their front door and found Steve's body on the floor at the bottom of the staircase, completely unresponsive. Lana's immediate reaction was panic and she ran out onto the street and waved down somebody on their motorbike named James Blackledge. She was screaming and sobbing and she was telling him to call 911 and that her husband has died and fell down the stairs. James called 911, but while he was on the phone, Lana was so hysterical and frantic that she just ran off in the other direction and she ran to a neighbor's house and just started banging on the window of Terry Floyd's house. Terry was at home and he came outside and Lana could just say, "It's Steve, it's Steve," and Terry knew something bad had happened. He asked Lana to get into his golf cart and they just drove over to her house. That's when Terry went into the house and saw Steve unresponsive on the floor. He decided to check his pulse and found that there was nothing there and that he was probably not alive. Shortly after this, the county sheriff arrived to the house and Lana was just unable to speak. She was just so distraught and sobbing so much that a police officer and a friend had to take her into the living room and comfort her for a little bit. At this time, Steve's nephew, Nick French, was also contacted to just let him know to come over to the house because Steve had passed away. They were very close, they had a really loving relationship, and Nick also happens to be a very experienced police officer who worked in the county just over. Nick was working that day, and after hearing the news, he stopped work and came straight to the house to just see what was going on and to support Lana. When he got there, he saw that Lana was in tears and she was acting in a way that you would expect somebody to act if their husband just died. She was completely distraught and an emotional mess, really. He gave her a big hug and comforted Lana for a little bit. At around 1 p.m. that afternoon, the deputy coroner came over to the house as well and determined that Steve's death was likely caused by a heart attack. This was a pretty plausible explanation because Steve was 64 years old at the time of his death. But Nick didn't really buy it. He was slowly starting to notice that Lana's behavior was just a little bit off. First, he knew that there were 2 phones in the house and Lana made no attempt to call an ambulance. It would have been much quicker if she could have just called someone at the scene rather than running away from the house to find somebody to do it for her. The second thing is, she's a nurse, so why didn't she even start CPR until help arrived? Nick was making just a mental note of these things. It seemed unusual, but he didn't want to suspect Lana at this point because there wasn't really any evidence to suggest that she had been involved in this. But then he overheard a conversation that she had with the deputy coroner. The deputy coroner asked her what she would like to do for funeral arrangements. And Lana was just sobbing into her hands, and she looked up and she said it's just way too much for her right now. She can't think about funeral arrangements at the moment, which is completely understandable. I think anyone who just lost their husband would give a very similar response, to be honest. But then the deputy coroner suggested something, and they said, well, why don't they take Steve's body to the morgue and just run a couple of tests? And instantly, it was like flipping a switch. Lana changed. She looked up from her hands and said that she actually wants Steve's body to be taken to the funeral home just down the road, and she wants him to be cremated. And this was a red flag for Nick. He knew from that point on that Lana must have been involved in some way, because why did she all of a sudden switch her demeanor so quickly and say that suddenly she wants him cremated when a minute ago she had no idea what to do? Since Lana was the wife, she does have ultimate authority as to what happens to Steve's body after death, and she chose for him to be cremated in 2 days' time, which was very, very soon. All this talk about funeral arrangements made Nick realize he hadn't actually told Steve's other nephew that Steve had passed away. Chris Fagan was Steve's nephew as well, and they were also very close and had a very, very strong bond and a loving relationship. Nick, just out of respect, approached Lana to just say that he was going to contact Chris and let him know as to what happened. To this, Lana just said, absolutely not, do not contact him. Nick was really confused by this. Why would she not want him to contact Chris when they're relatives? He's going to find out eventually anyway. What's she trying to hide? Nick just tried to get some more information as to why she didn't want Chris knowing, but Lana wasn't giving anything. She just said no, she just does not want Chris to know under any circumstances. Nick just thought she was being ridiculous, so he just went upstairs into their bedroom to give him a call to let him know. But when he got upstairs, he saw that their room was a complete mess. There were clothes everywhere. There was bed sheets on the floor. The sheets on the bed were soaked in urine. It did not seem like Steve had vertigo for 3 days. It seemed like he was bedridden, like really, really ill for 3 days. Nick immediately came over to the house, and he was just so upset that his uncle was gone. He gave Lana a hug as well, and he really tried to be there to support her. And Nick hadn't told Chris about his suspicions at this time. And Chris was just really kind-hearted, and he was just talking to Lana and really just trying to help her out. He said that he could help her find Steve's will. Lana just put up a massive barrier and she said, no, he doesn't have a will. Chris knew that she was involved in this because Chris knew that Steve had a will because he was the executor. Lana somehow got out of the conversation with Chris, and she was talking in the kitchen to some other people who were at the house. Chris and Nick were both overhearing her conversation that she was having. And she was not saying nice things about Steve. She was claiming that Steve was a drug addict and that she really didn't want an autopsy or a toxicology report to be done because it would reveal his drug addiction. Steve was never known to do drugs or have any issues with drugs ever in his life. This seemed like something that Lana had just completely made up on the spot. Lana was starting to feel that Nick and Chris were having some inclinations that she may have been involved, so she started feeling a bit of pressure and all of a sudden just told everybody to leave the house and leave her alone. When Nick and Chris left the house, they had a conversation and they both agreed that everything was just a little bit suspicious and they needed to get that toxicology report and the autopsy done as soon as possible before the cremation. They didn't have much time, so they raced over to the coroner's office and requested these two things. The coroner actually said that they would do it because of their suspicions. And they got the report back for the autopsy, which stated that there was no evidence of any heart attack or any natural causes of death. The toxicology report showed that there was an extremely high level of a substance called tetrahydrozoline, or THZ, which is extremely toxic, and the amount that was found in Steve's blood was enough to kill him. THC is not a very common substance or poison that people use, so the coroner just wanted to have a chat with the forensic toxicologist to see what this substance is and where it may have come from. The toxicologist confirmed that Steve had died from a lethal dose of THC, and that THC causes respiratory arrest, which means that you stop breathing, a really rapid heart rate. It can cause dizziness and nausea. After finding out these results, the deputy coroner called Lana over to the office. The office was actually being recorded at the time as well. Lana didn't know this was happening, but she came in for questioning. They presented her with a toxicology report which showed the really high levels of THC and whether Lana would know what this is about. Lana said the weirdest thing. She said that Steve, every morning he wakes up and he makes a coffee and he puts a couple of Visine eye drops into his coffee to help him go to the bathroom. THC is the main component in Visine eye drops and it's extremely toxic. If Lana knew that THC was poisonous or lethal in some way, why would she have not told her husband that he shouldn't be doing this to go to the bathroom? Also, there are other medications that can help you go to the bathroom. Lana responded saying she had nothing to do with his death. This was not enough for a confession or any solid evidence that Lana murdered her husband. She left the office and she was in the car with the deputy, and that's when she made her confession. This was Lana's story. Lana said that Steve was extremely abusive. He was emotionally abusive, he called her names, and she was just so sick of him telling her to do this and do that around the house. So what she decided to do was just put a couple of drops of Visine into his water. Not enough to kill him, but enough to make him pretty ill. And that's what she wanted. She wanted him to be extremely unwell and to just be miserable. That's what happened. For 3 days, he was extremely ill. He was actually bedridden. But on the 3rd day, Lana was so angry that she just got the entire bottle and she squeezed the entire contents into his water and he drank it. Visine is both colorless and tasteless, and Steve would have had no idea what was happening to him in the days leading up to his death. He may have had some inclination that Lana was doing something to either his food or his water, which is possibly why his phone was never found on him and his family members were not able to be in contact with him for a few days as well, which also was just completely out of character. The fact that he was found at the bottom of the staircase indicates that maybe he was trying to escape or leave the house while Lana wasn't at home so he could go and get some help, but unfortunately he never made it. After this confession, police did look into whether Steve was abusive in any way, and they asked his ex-partners. All of them denied him being abusive, either verbally or physically. The police now had an arrest warrant for Lana. She felt so guilty that she accidentally killed her husband when all she was trying to do was just make him suffer and have diarrhea. Nobody bought it. Everyone thought that she was trying to kill her husband, especially because in 2016, something similar happened to them, where Lana accidentally shot a crossbow at Steve's head but missed. Steve was sleeping in bed at the time and he woke up when the crossbow landed next to him, and he just sort of said, "What's going on?" And Lana said, "Oh, it's an accident." And they just agreed it was an accident and they moved on. There were no charges pressed. Nothing in their relationship really changed. They just moved on from this incident. Isn't it strange that she had a crossbow in the room ready to go, pointed at somebody? I don't know. It doesn't really sound like an accident to me, but Lana's motives were investigated as well as to why would she have wanted Steve to die. He had a lot of money, and people think that she wanted him to die because she wanted to inherit all his wealth. And that is the main motive for why we think that Lana may have wanted her husband dead. Finally, on the 13th of August 2018, Lana was charged with the murder of her husband, and in 2020 she was sentenced to 25 years in prison after pleading guilty to manslaughter. She's currently serving her sentence at the Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood County in South Carolina. I just wanted to say that everything I've found about this case is available online, and Visine eye drops are still available over the counter, and I do not recommend putting it in your drink or anybody else's drink. This information was on news websites as well, and that's not my intention to get anybody harmed. If you do want to watch more videos like this, then please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell. I'll be making videos weekly, and I'll be making them about cases like this or about anything that's a bit scary or disturbing. and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!